She built her company from nothing, and she swore the day she signed her first lease that she would never let sentiment cost her what discipline had earned her, until the morning she fired the one man who never once let her down. Marlo Ashcombe was 38 years old when she finally made partner at the firm she had clawed her way into 11 years earlier. As an unpaid intern, nobody remembered hiring. She had grown up in a 2-bedroom apartment above a laundromat in Toledo, watching her mother work double shifts just to keep the lights on, and she had promised herself that she would never again feel that particular kind of powerlessness. So when she finally built Ashcombe Logistics into a company with 400 employees and offices in 3 states, she ran it the way she had run her own life, with rules that did not bend, deadlines that did not move, and a single unspoken law that everyone in the building understood without ever being told twice: you show up on time or you do not show up at all. For 11 years, that rule had never once failed her, until the morning I met Corbin Delacroix. Corbin had been with the company for 9 of those 11 years. He started in the mailroom. The same month, Marlo was promoted to floor manager, and over the better part of a decade, he had worked his way up to logistics coordinator, a job that suited him because it let him solve problems quietly, without ever needing anyone to notice him doing it. He was the kind of employee other managers wrote memos about, not because he caused trouble, but because he never did. He was always the first car in the parking lot. He was always the last light off on the 3rd floor. He remembered the names of every driver's children. He brought his own coffee because he said the break room stuff tasted like it had been filtered through a gym sock. And that small, dry joke was the closest thing to controversy Corbin Delacroix had ever caused in 9 years. So when he walked through the glass doors of Ashcombe Logistics at 9:47 on a gray Tuesday morning, 47 minutes after the doors were supposed to open, the entire floor went quiet in a way that felt almost physical, like the air had been let out of the room. Marlo was already standing near the reception desk. She had been standing there since 9:15, arms crossed, watching the second hand on the lobby clock the way a hawk watches a field mouse. She had fired 3 people over the years for being late, and every single time, she had felt nothing but the cold satisfaction of a rule properly enforced. She told herself lateness was not really about minutes. It was about respect. It was about whether a person valued their word more than their excuses. And so, when Corbin walked in, breathless, his tie crooked, a raw scrape visible across his knuckles, she did not ask him where he had been. She simply said, "My office." Now, he followed her in silence, past the rows of cubicles, where nobody was pretending not to watch, and when the door clicked shut behind them, Marlo did not sit down. She stood behind her desk with her hands flat against the polished wood, the same way she always stood when she wanted a conversation to feel shorter than it was going to be. 9 years, she said. 9 years, Corbin, and you know the policy better than anyone in this building. I don't make exceptions. Not for tenure. Not for performance reviews, not for anything. If I make one for you, I have to make one for everybody. And then the rule means nothing. Corbin didn't argue. That was the strange part. He simply nodded, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed somewhere just past her shoulder, and said, "I understand. I'm going to need your badge," Marlo said, and her voice did not shake, because it never did. "HR will process your final check by Friday." He reached into his pocket, took out the small plastic badge that had let him into this building for 9 years, and set it gently on her desk, like it was something fragile. Then he turned and walked out, and he did not look back, and he did not say another word. And that, more than anything, was what stayed with her, because guilty men explain themselves. Angry men argue, but Corbin had simply absorbed it, like a man who had already decided, somewhere on the drive-in, that whatever happened to him next was simply the price of something else entirely. The rest of Marlo's day went on the way it always did. Meetings, calls, a shipment delay in Ohio that ate up most of her afternoon, but somewhere around 4 o'clock, her assistant, a sharp-eyed young woman named Delphine, knocked on her door, holding a folded piece of paper. "This was in the mailroom," Delphine said. "Addressed to you. I think Corbin left it before he cleared out his desk." Marlowe almost told her to just put it with the rest of the exit paperwork. But something in the careful, deliberate handwriting on the front of it made her open it right there at her desk. It was not a resignation letter, and it was not an appeal. It was an explanation Corbin had clearly never intended to give her out loud. The letter explained that Corbin lived alone with his father, a retired ironworker named Desmond, who had suffered a stroke 8 months earlier, and now required someone nearby every single morning to help him from his bed to his chair, to make sure his medication was measured out correctly, to make sure he did not attempt the stairs alone, the way he had once before, resulting in a fall that cracked 2 ribs. Corbin had never told anyone at the office because, in his words, he did not want anyone's pity, and he did not want a schedule built around his personal life. He had simply woken up 45 minutes earlier, every day for 8 months to make sure his father was safe before racing to work, arriving each morning with time to spare, exactly as he always had. But that morning, Desmond had collapsed in the hallway on his way to the bathroom. Corbin had found him on the floor, unconscious, his lips faintly blue, and instead of calling an ambulance and walking away to make it to work on time, he had stayed. He had performed the compressions his father's home health aide had taught him for exactly this scenario. He had ridden with him in the ambulance to St. Agatha's, made sure the intake nurse had his father's full medical history, and only once his father was stable and breathing on his own did Corbin leave the hospital, drive straight to the office without even stopping to change his shirt, and walk in 47 minutes late. The raw scrape across his knuckles was not from a fight. It was from the tile floor of his father's hallway, where he had knelt for 11 minutes doing compressions on a man who, according to the letter, had opened his eyes just long enough to say, "Go, you'll be late," before losing consciousness again. Marlowe read the letter twice, and then a third time, and by the third time her hands were no longer entirely steady. She sat there for a long moment in the quiet of her office, looking at the badge still resting on her desk where Corbin had left it, and she thought about her mother, working a second shift so many years ago, while a landlord threatened to change the locks over rent that was 4 days late, and how her mother had never once had the chance to explain herself to someone who might have simply chosen to listen. She picked up her phone and called St. Agatha's Hospital, identifying herself only as a family friend, and after being transferred twice, she finally learned that Desmond Delacroix was in stable condition, resting, expected to make a full recovery thanks to the quick action of the person who found him. Marlowe did not go home that night. She drove to the hospital instead, still in her blazer, still holding the folded letter in her coat pocket, like it might disappear if she let go of it. She found Corbin sitting alone in a hallway chair outside his father's room, elbows on his knees, staring at a vending machine like it owed him money. He looked up when she approached, and for the first time all day, something like real emotion crossed his face. Not anger, but something closer to exhaustion, and beneath that, a kind of bracing, like a man expecting one more piece of bad news before the day was finally over. "I read your letter," Marlowe said quietly, sitting down in the chair beside him without asking permission. "You didn't have to write it. You didn't owe me an explanation." "I didn't write it for you," Corbin said. "I wrote it so somebody would know why, in case things went differently today, in case I didn't get the chance to explain it myself." Marlowe was quiet for a long moment, watching the fluorescent lights hum overhead, feeling, for the first time in 11 years, the full weight of a rule she had built her entire identity around. "I built this company on the idea that nothing excuses lateness," she said, finally. "I thought that rule made me strong. I thought it made me fair, because it applied to everyone equally, no matter who they were." She turned to look at him. "But I never once asked myself what fairness actually costs, or who it costs it to. You've given this company 9 years without a single complaint, and the one morning your father needed you most, I made you choose between him and your job, and then I punished you for choosing him.